Dearest fantasy readers, welcome to the Dear Fantasy Reader podcast, where two best friends, Hannah and Karen, travel through the pages of our favorite romantasy novels. Join us as we take flight into the world of the Empyrean series, diving deep into the chapters, exploring characters, scenes, theories, foreshadowing, and more, taking what we've learned from the second book, Iron Flame, to reread and re-experience the first as we count down for the release of Onyx Storm.
With that content warning and spoiler alert, we will be covering anything and everything Empyrean series to this date and any content Rebecca Yarros has given us. Also, due to the nature of these books, this podcast is rated R in content and language.
As Rebecca Yarros says, readers who may be sensitive to these elements, please take note and prepare to enter Basgiath War College. First, a few quick things. We just released 2 bonus episodes where we talk about our Eras Tour experience and another where we go through the Fourth Wing chapters that we most hope to get from Xaden's POV bonus chapter in the new paperback version out 1 week from the day this episode drops. So if you haven't already checked those out, go do that. We also have a new addition to our Rebecca Yarros Archives collection. She did a Q&A in London just a few days ago, and footage just started coming out, i.e., last night. I will drop the clips I have found in the show notes. They are juicy. We might have to do a bonus episode to walk through each one of the details she dropped, but we will incorporate a few throughout this episode because, boy, some of them change things. Now, time for our quick refresh of chapters 17 through 19 from our personal scribe informant, Karen.
Violet wakes up a dragon rider for the very first time. All the other cadets spent the night celebrating, and Rhiannon asks her about her kiss with Dane. Violet tells her that she disappointingly feels nothing for him. As they have breakfast, there is a clear shift in balance of power between the riders, with many acknowledging Violet as the rider of one of the most powerful dragons, and Jack, not so much. Violet begins flight lessons with Taryn and sparring lessons with Imogen. Afterwards, Dane tells Violet that their kiss never should have happened because of the rules, of course. Violet understandably loses respect for him solely for his reasoning. Violet later visits the archives and catches up with an old friend, Jasenia. She asks her for a copy of The Fables of Baron, a collection of folklore about Venin and Wyvern that Violet's dad had shared with her when she was younger. Jasenia returns, signing that she could not find the folklore collection Violet requested. Violet then gets lunch with Riddick, Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Quinn, where she learns that Sawyer is a metallurgist, meaning that he can manipulate metals. He is the first one of the newly bonded riders to have a signet. Later, Violet attends flight lessons again. When they are over, Taryn remarks that she only fell about a dozen times, which is an improvement for her. Dane approaches her angry that she didn't tell him that she couldn't hold her seat. He tells her that he is terrified that she is not going to make it to graduation, and Violet laughs in his face. She finally stands her ground and tells him that they will never be anything more than friends because he doesn't have faith in her. Shortly after, a writer named Jeremiah begins screaming, reading people's thoughts out loud back to them in front of everyone. He has manifested an intrinsic signet, a capital offense. Professor Carr snaps his neck, killing him for it. That night, Taryn wakes Violet up from her dream. 6 unbonded cadets surround her, armed and ready to attack. Orin is among them, and he grabs Violet, attempting to slice her throat with his dagger. Before he can kill her, Violet's bedroom door flies open, and Adarna's voice screams in her head, Everyone in the room, aside from Violet, is suddenly frozen in time. Xaden storms into her room in a fit of rage as time starts back. He uses his shadows to choke all of the cadets by the throat, except for Orin, who he personally slashes the throat of himself. Violet goes into shock as Xaden gently checks her wounds and dresses her before leading her to meet their dragons. And Darna tells her that she has gifted her temporary, unique feather tail power to Violet and shares that feather tails are adolescent dragons. And Darna is not full grown. Violet promises that she will use this gift responsibly as it could kill them both. The group agrees not to tell anyone that Violet can stop time or the nature of feather tails. Xaden says that they need to figure out how unbonded cadets got into Violet's room, and Violet tells him that she saw the person that let them in. Talk about a cliffhanger!
But let's get into it. Starting with Violet's first morning waking up as a dragon rider, we get these juicy details of the celebrating that basically all of the new riders partake in, seeing almost everyone coupled up overnight, including Sawyer and Rhee, Liam, and an unnamed first year. You know what? They deserve it. We love a good friends with benefits.
Yes, love that for them. And I loved Rhee and Sawyer here. They're definitely not going to be a relationship, but who doesn't love a little bit of fun?
Then we really start to see this shift in how Violet is perceived now that she's bonded to the most powerful dragon willing to bond, the second most powerful one in Navarre. People that wouldn't even speak to her are now acknowledging her. Second years are sitting with them also because, as they point out, there's no use to getting to know them when they could die. And at first, this sounds really cruel. But then we get this from Violet's perspective in Iron Flame, where she tries not to even learn the first year's names as a defense mechanism. And who can blame them?
So true. I don't know if you've ever watched Boy Meets World, have you? No? Okay, so the power dynamic shift kind of reminded me of an episode of Boy Meets World where the two main characters befriend the school bully. And he's like this really big guy and everyone's afraid of him. And then everyone in the school starts treating the two main characters differently. They're nicer to them. They're trying to do favors for them. They're moving out of their way at lunch and they're like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to take your spot. And now Taryn's not a bully, but the switch of the power dynamic definitely reminded me of that episode because it was kind of a similar shift.
And this power balance shift isn't just huge for Violet. Jack is being treated differently because he's bonded a less powerful dragon, which Violet points out is only going to encourage his ruthlessness more as a feral dog bites harder when they are cornered, setting up for him being desperate enough to turn venom.
It's definitely setting it up for him to turn venom and just showing his need for power. Violet says there's no satisfaction in watching Jack struggle because she knows he's going to come after her and others harder.
Oh, yeah, and especially her because she has bonded the dragon he has his eyes set on. Now, at this point, Xaden hasn't assigned Violet a bodyguard. But he does have Imogen start training her. And I really like this because I think it shows that he did take Garrick's words and advice to heart about letting Violet try to protect herself before assigning Liam as her bodyguard. And the way he rationalizes this is by thinking of ways to prepare her so she can protect herself, which again is the difference between him and Dane, and doesn't assign Liam to her until after she's attacked. So he does give her that chance. It just doesn't take long to find that she needs more protection than she can manage herself.
Yeah, that's a really good point because after Xaden's POV chapter, I just kind of assumed that he had already made that decision and wasn't sure if he actually took Garrick's words to heart. But you're right, we don't see Liam as her bodyguard until later on.
Yeah, I did too. It really shows just how much you can forget even after multiple rereads, because I had thought the same thing. it actually ended up being better on Xaden's part than I had initially even thought. So similarly, when first reading, I thought the dragons had some sort of like all-knowing intuition about them. Like, how does Taryn know who Violet is before they bond? How does he know who she can trust? So now I realize that dragons are not all-knowing and can be very flawed, though, you know, there's exceptions with ones like Taryn, who's older and wiser and more cunning. It's not just that, though. I realized he knows Violet through Xaden's eyes because of Sigale. He knows she has strength of heart and cunningness because Xaden picked up on those things from her as he got to know her up until threshing. And of course, because she did defend Endarna in the clearing. We know this from presentation day that the dragons can't inherently sense the values and traits of humans, as they needed to talk amongst themselves to see how they interact with each other. And it's so special to me to connect that Taryn had such a positive perception of Violet before he saw it himself at threshing. And he seems to know that she can trust Imogen. Well, that's probably because of Xaden as well, and how she has been helping the revolution with him this whole time.
I think I really saw them as all-knowing when I first read too. Up until Taryn talks about another dragon choosing poorly. Like, if they were all-knowing, none of them would choose poorly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I had another thought, and I wonder if Taryn also had this positive view of Violet, not only because of Xaden, but could it also be because of Brennan?
I didn't even think of that. Yeah, you're so right. And okay, processing. That actually, one, is even more endearing, because at that point, like, Taryn would have been hearing about her for years before Xaden ever bonded Sigale through his previous writer, Naolan, who Rebecca Yarros recently hinted at Naolan and Brennan being romantically involved. She doesn't directly say it, but I believe what she said was, no one is going to risk their life, like make that level of a sacrifice for someone they don't care very deeply about. And she said it just like that in like vague terms, but we can pick up on context clues and say they were lovers. So yeah, you're right.
I didn't even think about Taryn's previous writer with that. I was kind of thinking of like how Xaden was working with Brennan, but oh my gosh, it goes even deeper than that.
Oh, yeah, because we don't really know how long. Oh, but you're right. You're saying so recently. Yeah, no, this could go back years.
Oh my gosh. That's wild.
So Taryn would have likely at least, like, I don't know how deeply they discussed Brennan's family, but he at least would have known that she was projected to be the head of the scribes.
Whoa.
So that's
anyways.
Cool. That kind of just blew my mind a little bit, but
me too.
Y'all buckle up, because we are going to have so many of those moments in this episode. So, you know, like, let's take a moment though. I've never seen anyone peel an apple with a dagger, but this description of Xaden peeling an apple with a dagger before his gaze lifts to lock with Violet's was such a vivid and attractive moment. So much that I was distracted. I only just now caught that her whole head tingles. It doesn't say scalp here, so I didn't pick up on this being a scalp prickle moment, but he is definitely using his intrinsic signet here. And, you know, we do usually save that discussion for later, but whoa.
I loved it. And I actually made a comment in my notes because I had only remembered the moments of scalp prickling when she wasn't paying attention. And we kind of talked about that. But here she's already looking at him. And I think that he had to have been checking her intent to train with Imogen.
That's one idea. We'll come back to it.
And then when she feels her head tingle in this scene, she thinks, gods, Is there any part of my body that doesn't physically react to the sight of him? And that is super interesting that she just thinks that the scalp prickling sensation is basically just like a hormonal reaction to him and not even realizing that he's reading her.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where, one, Rebecca distracted us with some really well-written, sensual text there. And also, that's how she covered up these right in your face, so obvious moments where there was something more that was a secret. And she was covering that up through this. But yeah, you're right. Violet herself definitely chalks it up. And I came back and added this game-changing bit of info from Rebecca Yarros' London Q&A that I mentioned earlier. That literally, y'all, it was just last night that I saw these videos and added it today. When she was asked if Xaden could hear all of the filthy things Violet was thinking about him through Fourth Wing with his intrinsic signet, she said yes. Now, she did clarify that sometimes yes and sometimes no. You can go back through Fourth Wing and kind of read when she, Violet, can sense when someone's there, sense things like that, and you can tell where he's, Xaden, kind of pilfering because that train was set in motion the day I started. So she's saying that she dropped these hints in from the day she started writing Fourth Wing. And I looked up pilfering, and it basically means to steal or take. So he is intentionally entering into her mind and taking thoughts, just picking up on context clues to learn more about his signet. So Rebecca is referring here to the times that Violet feels her scalp prickling. So this is confirmation that he heard the line you just said about her body physically reacting to him.
Oh my gosh.
So he knows just how down bad she is for him already. That's what this is telling me, which also confirms he is hearing more than intentions. But we will come back to that part later.
I'm obsessed with this information from Rebecca Yarros, but I just have to say, I would also be so mortified if someone heard all of these thoughts that I had about them. I would just be like,
yeah,
oh, that's really embarrassing.
And I think that's part of why Violet feels violated in Iron Flame. Like, I was like, oh, that's so cool. But she, rightfully so, is very taken aback by this. And yeah, you think those moments are private. And yes, she shares those with him at times. But she wasn't consenting to sharing those thoughts with him. And that is a violation.
Was why we got mad at Dane.
That's true. I will say that's not why I disliked Dane for him doing that, especially knowing it was an accident. But I do acknowledge that they did the same thing here.
Yeah. It makes sense that he isn't only reading intentions too, because he responds directly to her thoughts at some points and not her intentions. And I also like that Rebecca Yarros clarifies his signet a little bit more here, because he's not like Jeremiah, because he's not reading everything all at once. And it seems that he's able to pick and choose what he's reading, like we said, similar to Dane, but without touch.
Yeah, it seems like he intentionally goes looking for it. Or, as we find out in Iron Flame, he says it becomes really easy for Violet to send him her thoughts through their bond. So that's where it gets tricky. Like, he can't really help what he is sent, you know, until he learns to control his signet more, which hopefully will come with time. We'll see.
I wonder how his signet is going to change now after the end of Iron Flame.
You just want me to go down a rabbit hole, don't you? Because I think he's going to go, to put it very simply, to like save some time, I think he's going to go full-blown intrinsic. We'll get to this later, but I already believe he is. He just doesn't know it. Once he understands it more, I think
Ooh.
Yeah. Now on to flight lessons. We get to ride dragons and apparently fall off of them continuously as well. So Violet gets really frustrated with Taryn here for doing harder maneuvers than Professor Kaori is teaching them, even on day 1. And she's confused on why he's making it harder when she already struggles to keep her seat. Dane even says, it's not like there's any aerial threat out there besides griffins, and we know one breath of fire means those birds are goners. Well, we now know that that's not the case. They are not the only aerial threat out there, that venin are. And Tarn is fully aware of this. So he is prepping her here for that level of battle, which is interesting that Navarre is not.
It's such a good moment of foreshadowing that you fully miss on a first read, because now we know they're so much worse than griffins, with the venin and the wyverns being out there.
Yeah, well, I'm going to toot my own horn here and say, and I was surprised it wasn't picked up by more people, but as soon as she told us about the fables of the venin and the wyvern, I thought, you don't put that in a book for no reason. But this was the point I was sure that we were going to get wyvern. I didn't understand then what they were. I didn't understand that they were basically dragons, but this is where I was like, oh, Taryn knows. So
I feel like I'm starting to look at these kind of books differently, because I read this a year ago now for the first time, and it was my first fantasy book. So I was not fully aware of how much foreshadowing goes into a series like this.
Oh, yeah, which I think you all can tell at this point. That's one of my favorite things about reading. There's this thing that my English teacher told me in high school that has literally lived with me. When you're reading a book, if a shotgun is mentioned to be in a kitchen in chapter 1, that shotgun better go off eventually in another chapter. And so the mention of the venin and the wyvern in the fables was the shotgun for me. And then this was like, okay, that shotgun is definitely going off. We just have to wait and see like when it does. And I'll be honest, knowing it was a series, I didn't think it would be the end of the book, but woo. Anyways, so we get this conversation here after flight lessons with Dane where he basically frames her not reciprocating his kiss like he expected as if it were his choice, and he's letting her down easy. But I noticed something here that explains a lot. Right before Dane brings up the night before, he, quote, palms her face gently and his gaze drops to her lips for a heartbeat before he steps back. Then he brings up the night before. I think he was about to kiss her again, but he read her memory here and found that she did not have a positive experience kissing him and quickly diverted, bringing it up himself and saying it never should have happened.
Ooh, I thought about this too. So do you think that this could have been the first time he accidentally reads her memories?
Yeah.
But if he realizes that she didn't have a positive experience kissing him, I don't understand why he goes into why they can't be together right now.
Well, I think that they don't really get to see each other very often, right? So like alone. So I think maybe he was setting himself up here for like a sweet moment, and then he had to shut it down for himself, and his ego was probably hurt a little bit. So he like reframed it to be the one to essentially like do the breakup, you know, getting ahead of it before she's the one to do it, or maybe even just wanting to like save the awkwardness moving forward as best he could. His justification, though, being about the rules and him working hard for his rank, makes Violet lose respect for him, understandably. And I agree, but I think he was just using that as a reason since he knew Violet didn't reciprocate.
Ooh, sounds like he was trying to boost his ego a bit with that reasoning.
Yeah, that's what I'm taking out of it, and it fits perfectly for his character at this point in the series. Then we get to visit the archives and meet Jasenia. So interesting to me that the scribes are not allowed to show emotion in the archives, because doing so would imply that they are not dedicated to their work.
It's so interesting, and also interesting to think of Violet in that role, because she really wears her heart on her sleeve. So I cannot imagine her being stone-faced and never showing emotion. And this definitely makes sense why she has the heart of a writer.
That's a really good point. Violet is very expressive. So we don't really see a ton of that scribe training in that way from her. And I'm actually really glad that it doesn't limit her ability to bond and connect with her friends.
Right.
One of the best things about her is how much she cares. And for her to have to mask that would be a disservice to her best traits. This is where we find out that Navarre is doing something suspicious and censoring their books when Jasenia can't find their copy of the Book of Fables of the Baron that talk about the Venin and the Wyvern. This whole scene in the archives is crucial for Violet's story in so many ways, to the point where she's looking around for her dad in all of the scribe cloaks. She's thinking about missing her first home, but also that the writer's quadrant has become the right home.
Oh, tug at the heartstrings.
Yeah, and I think those two main points really tie in well together, that her first home is actually quite false.
Yeah.
And why it wrecks her so much at the end of the book to find that out. We jump around a lot in this chapter. We have a lot of flash forwards, but we flash forward to lunchtime, and I really enjoy scenes like their lunch, where it shows just how much closer Vi's core squad has become now that they have trauma bonded with each other and bonded dragons.
The best kind of bond is a trauma bond. I don't know, but I loved it too. And they have their own little family here, and I just love it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the chosen family development that makes my heart so happy to read. Really, though, these kids can't seem to catch a break. They can make it through all of these deadly tests to finally bond a dragon and still die from not manifesting their signet soon enough. I think it's really cool that their relic is the conduit for the dragons to channel their power into the riders' bodies, but less cool that they can blow up if the rider doesn't manifest a signet to let it out.
Oh, and Imogen assures them that this hasn't happened in decades, so it's not something that they should really be worried about. But honestly, I would be so worried. I mean, I have had so many dreams where I am magical or supposed to have powers, and then I'm just unable to use my magic. So this is a personal fear of mine.
Yeah. And also the fact that it's not a hard deadline. So you literally could just blow up at any moment in just a few months. And my anxiety, honestly, could never. But then Riddick's line, "Fuck me, it's always something around here." He kills me.
Oh, same. Riddick is the best comedic relief, and it's something that's so necessary with how many tense moments happen at this school.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is so true. His personality was absolutely a vital addition to balancing it all out, because you really are told your characters are going to die from this. Oh, and this. Then Jack yells out, "I knew it would work," talking about Caroline Ashton bonding a dragon whose previous and very temporary rider died during flight lessons. This was setting up for the attack. It just showed every unbonded cadet that the dragon of a newly bonded rider who dies will rebond, and boy, do they act fast, but we will get to that shortly. First, We flash forward again, and Vi has just finished another round of flight lessons. We get what I think is my favorite section of banter in these chapters. Violet tells Taryn that he could call her Violet instead of Silver One. Taryn responds, quote, I know, and I could call you Violence, like the wing leader. She says, you wouldn't dare. You know how much that ass annoys me. And Taryn says, annoys you? Is that what you call it when your heart rate? And she cuts him off. Don't even start with me.
Oh my gosh.
Alone, love that. But it is so similar to Xaden and Sigale in chapter 16, Xaden's POV, when Violet says, little does he, Taryn, know just how much you dislike me. Sigale then says to Xaden, he knows exactly how much you dislike her and how often you stare, before Xaden cuts her off and threatens to volunteer for every cold weather mission in existence. These POV parallels have become my favorite thing.
Oh my gosh, this was definitely one of my favorite things to read too after getting Xaden's POV. And like you said, just I love the parallel between both of them trying to deny their feelings and their dragons calling them out on it.
Oh yeah, and I cannot wait because there's definitely going to be at least one of these parallels in the new Xaden POV bonus chapter, and I can't wait.
Can't wait.
Unfortunately, Dane interrupts this moment all angry. But I do love how defensive Taryn is of Vi here, making her tell Dane that he will scorch the ground where he stands if he harms her. Couple snaps for Taryn. Thank you. The simplest way I can put it without spending 10 minutes straight complaining about Dane is I've been giving him the benefit of the doubt, but you are right, Karen. It comes down to him not believing in her, and he takes it even further, discrediting the effort and success she has had in becoming a writer by siding with Amber Mavis, saying she acted dishonorably.
Ugh.
Also, this was foreshadowing that Dane was going to be on Amber's side in the next episode.
Yeah, Hannah has been giving Dane the benefit of the doubt, and I have not been going easy on Dane during this podcast. But you guys, it is so hard to when he is continuously acting like this.
Yeah, you know, I really try and balance out our critique of him as not to do nothing but complain. It would be easy to do that. But right now, I think that our disdain for Dane is entirely valid.
Especially in this set of chapters, because he is the worst that he has been this entire time.
Absolutely. It was quite frustrating to read, to be entirely honest. With that, though, Violet straight up laughing in his face when he tries to justify this with him being terrified is so beyond deserved. And she says it best, throwing his own line back at him that this place cuts away the bullshit and niceties, revealing whoever you are at your core, right back at him, saying, quote, let's get one thing straight, Dane. The reason we'll never be anything more than friends isn't because of your rules. It's because you have no faith in me. Even now, when I've survived against all odds and bonded not just one dragon, but two, you still think I won't make it? So forgive me, but you're about to be some of the bullshit that this place cuts away from me.
Oh.
I just got chills reading it.
Oh, good for Violet. Good for her, because, dude, it was harsh, but it was what Dane needed to hear. And super deserved. And we've been saying it over and over that he just doesn't believe in her. And I'm so glad that Violet called him out on it too.
I'm so proud of her for standing up for herself here.
It's like she's one of our friends and we're just cheering her on from the sidelines saying, you go girl, good job.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly what I felt like when I was reading it. As Violet walks away from this conversation, she starts to hear screaming. And this is where we get to see on page the consequences of having an intrinsic signet. Poor Jeremiah gets his neck snapped by Professor Carr because being an intrinsic is a security risk and a capital offense.
Oof.
All in all, this scene with Jeremiah was setting up the consequences for whichever important character was to manifest this signet. Again, that shotgun I mentioned, which we learn was Xaden, and shows why he had to hide it. While this is a huge secret to keep from Violet, I can't find it in me to blame him, because we are shown firsthand what could have happened had someone found out through Violet's interrogation, memories, etc.
I 100% agree. He needed to hide it from Violet, not just for his own safety, but for hers too.
Yeah.
And especially when she didn't know how to shield yet 100% of the time, because Xaden is always shielding, and Violet had to learn how to do that and to be able to constantly do that. Because, like you said, the interrogation sessions that are coming for her, and she's cut off from her dragons during those times too. So
yeah,
she can't even shield at those points whenever she's cut off. I mean, if you just imagine during those interrogation scenes, if she had known and our least favorite memory reader had come in and actually taken her memories while she was cut off, it would have just been really bad.
Yeah, and honestly, if Xaden was doing this for selfish reasons, he would not have been so adamant about teaching her how to shield.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Violet would have been at risk as well as Xaden, but say Xaden was executed for this, if they'd been found out, he is holding the responsibility of all 107 marked ones quite literally on his back. And not just getting them through the writer's quadrant, which he wouldn't be there to help them with. He also is a leader of sorts of the revolution, which is going to affect so many people's lives. So he knows all of that at this point. You can't convince me that he should have told her sooner. I think maybe a little sooner in Iron Flame, but not at all in Fourth Wing. I don't blame him at all. But we'll get to that when we get to our Iron Flame deep dive. We jump forward again. So many flash forwards to a dream that Violet is suddenly woken up from by Tarn in imminent danger. And this scene is wild. It gave me such anxiety because I, like Violet, thought this was the one place that she was safe. But the unbonded were emboldened by Caroline bonding Glade, and 6 of them attacked her, trying to bond Tarn. One of them yelling, "He'll only respect us if we finish her." As if.
It's wild that they truly think that as well, because he definitely would not respect them or bond to any of them, especially Orin, since he wanted Violet to finish the job and kill him at threshing.
Agreed. But they're power hungry, that they're not thinking rationally. There is quite literally no way out of this situation for Violet. And while she fights back, she still intentionally avoids killing them. Every blow, every stab, it's all in places that wouldn't kill them.
If there ever was a time.
I love how much Violet values the life of other people, even when they don't deserve it. But girl, get it together. Like, you have to live. Then Andarna screams, "Mine," and freaking stops time. What?
I love our little golden dragon. Rebecca Yarros is so good at painting a picture when she writes these scenes, because I could just see them all stopping, frozen, and her just kind of like moving with her words. Like, it was so
described so well. I could also picture, especially when time starts moving and they're going in slow motion at times. I have to admit, though, I am sad that this is a temporary power of hers, but I do get it. That could get, she could be overpowered very easily with the power like that. This gives Vi just enough time to get out from under the knife before Xaden enters the room saying, You're all fucking dead. And then straight up kills all of them within minutes. Snaps for Xaden here. What? I know a lot of people find this like bad boy shadow daddy part really hot, and I'm not saying that I don't, but the part that got me was how he treated her after.
I definitely found the shadow daddy part hot.
Yeah.
But agree with you. He was so gentle with her after, and it's just not something you really expected at this point. Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing his rage was for her and what they were trying to do to her and not selfishly or just like him being on a killing spree is where it's hot for me, which we learn in how he treats her almost immediately, specifically with him saying he wished he had made them suffer longer after seeing the marks on her neck. This shows that his rage and reaction was not about his own life being at risk by them killing her. It was because he cares about her deeply already at this point. And while he nor Violet are ready to acknowledge it and admit it to themselves, he shows it. Which is the most like romantic part of a book for me. Yeah, the spicy scenes are always nice, but the romance and the tension build and stuff like that with these little scenes, all of the little moments here where he unlaces her corset gently strokes his finger over her injured ribs to check and see if they're broken. But none of them compare to when he drops to his knees in front of her to help her put on and lace up her boots. This had me full out swooning.
My notes for this part where he gets on his knees to put on her boots were literally just hot.
Mine were OMG. Because, like, are you kidding? This is where you know that Rebecca's a romance writer. Even Violet here thinking about running her hands through his hair was so sensual. And it's just those little details that all add up. Like this one. He doesn't just put her cloak on her shoulders. He buttons the collar of it for her. As Violet puts it, quote, like I'm something precious.
I screamed.
She is a romance author through and through. This is what makes intertwining romance with fantasy so captivating for me. I will never not read romantasy.
And I am a romance reader. I love a good romance book, but with the combined with fantasy, having that, this genre is just chef's kiss.
Oh, yeah. Well, Rebecca's mentioned in one interview that the stakes are a lot higher. She said something really funny along the lines of like, when you have like an enemies to lovers in a romance book, it's like someone's upset about the copy machine and the office being like misused. Whereas this is literally like, oh, you want to kill me because my mom killed your dad, but your dad killed my brother. And then there's like dragons involved. Definitely like takes it next level.
True enemies. You can't, I mean, in a contemporary romance, it's not a true enemy. It's like, I don't like this person. They're my work rival. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I think that was, it just makes such a difference. So Violet even says, but in my defense, and in a sick, twisted way, his rescue was pretty damned hot. So she acknowledges that here, but somehow still can't see how all of the moments that followed the rescue set up for him being into her. I'll cut her a little slack here, though. She was in actual shock.
She's still so unsure about what his intentions are. She knows that he no longer wants to kill her, but thinks that it's only because their lives are tied together. Like, Girly, he's not being selfish. He just likes you.
Yeah, okay, say he just comes in, kills all of them, looks at her and was like, get your shit together, and then walks out. Okay, I could see that. But the care he took, nope. Sorry, girlie, you were blind here. You just couldn't see it. It's fine.
I would probably be blind to it too, to be really honest.
I would have my sights set on this man. Any little thing, I'd be like, oh my God. Let's do this. Yeah, let's do this. So Xaden takes Violet to meet the dragon trio, and Andarna runs over, putting her nose to Violet's ribs, and Violet feels Andarna's anxiety as if it were her own. And I just love the layers to the dragon bond, where the writers can actually feel what their dragons do. And this is a really cool way, I think, for Rebecca Yarros to set us up for what she feels from Taryn in the coming chapters.
I cannot stop picturing Andarna as my dog Lady, my little Cocker Spaniel dachshund mix, and she's kind of golden like Andarna is too.
She has very, very much so puppy dog eyes, which I picture for Andarna. Oh, yeah.
Yes, 100%. And the paws and everything. I just love the bond between the two of them so much. And yeah, we'll definitely see how Violet feels Taryn's emotions very soon.
Very, very soon. Can't wait. And we find out here that Xaden, Vi, Sigale, and Taryn are all able to communicate telepathically, and that Andarna is not full grown because all Feathertails are adolescents.
On my first read, I was super surprised to find this out.
It totally went over my head.
And Andarna tells Violet that dragons shouldn't bond until they are full grown because they can accidentally gift their powers to humans, and if humans knew this, they might hunt her to steal her gifts. She says that dragons cannot channel until they are big, which will be a few years for her, but they are all born with something special. Which, importantly, is different from a signet because a signet is a combination of the dragon's power with the human's ability to channel, which reflects who a human is at the core of their being. In essence, Andarna gave her Feathertail gift directly to Violet to save her.
Yes, and this is where it clicked for me. Remember when Andarna said to Violet after threshing that maybe I was saving you? She was saving her because she knew that she could stop time before Tynan's lethal blow would have killed her. So we were wondering, like, why didn't she fly off? What was she going to do but snap her teeth? For some reason, I had thought that Andarna maybe manifested it in this moment, or like when she bonded Vi, but she says all Feathertails are born with it. So she was not defenseless at threshing. And had Taryn not shown up and Xaden not stepped forward, she very easily could have just stopped time right then for Violet to move out from under Tynan's blow. It just clicked.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense than what we were originally talking about for this.
Yeah, it does. And I wanted to definitely add that in since that was just last episode. But it's one of those things where like you get more information every time you read this. It's fascinating.
And now we are going to head on over to the Healer's Quadrant to get a temperature check on our beloved and some not so beloved characters. Who is hot this week and who is so not, and some of our favorite moments. So, Hannah, who was hot for you?
All right. I feel like I've made it abundantly clear that Xaden takes the whole cake this episode. I will explain my favorite moment if I haven't made it clear enough already when we get to favorite moments. But how about you, Karen?
I'm going to have to say Xaden as usual as well, especially in chapter 19 when he goes into protection mode. Hot.
Nothing beats it. Nothing beats it. Who was your so not?
Everyone who snuck into Violet's room to try to kill her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm really surprised, though, that I'm the one that's saying it this time, but fucking Dane and Amber Mavis for me are so not this week.
I definitely agree, but I was trying not to say Dane again.
After you just said this is the worst that he's been this far, that's progress, Karen. I'm really proud of you.
Couldn't be too predictable.
Okay, I like this. I like it. All right, my favorite moment. Nothing can compare to the moment where Xaden dropped to his knees to help Vi with her shoes. And the whole stretch of moments that followed were so sweet and sensual. And so that's my favorite.
And we definitely have the same favorite moment, because I have when Xaden drops to his knees to put Violet's boots on. And all I say is, hot.
I love that we said the same thing in two different ways.
You're like, it's so sweet and sensual. And I'm just like, hot.
I mean, it definitely overlaps because sweet and sensual is hot for me. So
hot.
So hot.
What were your favorite quotes?
When Violet thinks, not that I wouldn't climb the man like a tree if presented with the right set of circumstances. Yeah.
Yes.
Same, girly. Same. And he's literally like a fictional character. And when Violet finds out the circumstances of Andarna's gift and how she could kill her by using it, Violet says, I'll do my best to be worthy.
Oh, I love their bond. My favorite quote was the same as your first one, because we are on the same page this week. Mine was in chapter 19. Violet thinks, not that we're a couple, not that I wouldn't climb the man like a tree.
I love that for us. I do. It was a stellar line.
You know, it did take us until episode 8 to have the exact same thing for both the quotes and the favorite moments.
We had a couple overlaps, but you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Xaden just came in with this one.
So true.
Because we see this huge shift after Threshing, right? And now this, for me, this is where the book picked up. The second half of this book is my absolute favorite, which I'm sure you can see, especially when I start going down rabbit holes a little bit more with my theories. Speaking of, let's stop by the Scribe Quadrant for our Epigraph Analysis, starting with chapter 17. It is therefore only natural that the more powerful the dragon, the more powerful the signet its rider manifests. One should beware of a strong rider who bonds a smaller dragon, but even warier of the unbonded cadet who will stop at nothing to seize a chance to bond. Major Offendra's Guide to the Rider's Quadrant, unauthorized edition. All right, pointing out the obvious here, this was clearly prepping for the unbonded first years attacking Violet.
Mm-hmm.
But also Jack's motives for turning Venin.
Ooh.
One should beware of a strong rider who bonds a smaller dragon. That is what we see. And Rebecca's pointed this out in interviews. That was a turning point for Jack. He is power hungry. He wanted Tarn. He got a much less powerful dragon.
Right.
And that's why he is power hungry enough and resorts to pulling power from the earth, which turns you Venin.
And they even say out of the oranges, Jack's dragon is one of the smaller of that type of dragon too, not just smaller than Tarn, who is the biggest and one of the strongest.
I didn't catch that.
His orange was smaller than the average orange.
His ego couldn't handle that.
No. Which goes back to me saying in our last episode, I really think he was scared that he was going to bond Andarna and get the small dragon.
To me, that's canon. I think it's called headcanon or something like that. I fully believe that. It fits so perfectly with the circumstances. It makes so much more sense than him just going out of his way. Because he's power hungry. Why is he not focused on going and bonding to get power faster?
Right.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Great point.
Chapter 18's epigraph is, "There is nothing more sacred than the archives. Even temples can be rebuilt, but books cannot be rewritten. Colonel Daxton's Guide to Excelling in the Scribe Quadrant." Now, this is a really interesting epigraph for a scribe like me. Again, it shows that the scribes do hold the real power in the world, which is what Violet's dad says to her in her dream in this chapter.
Yeah, and it also shows that if Navarre has burned past history or manipulated it, it's just gone. That history is lost as if it never happened, which leads us to our next epigraph. All right, just prefacing that I fell down a rabbit hole of history with this epigraph. So I hope you are ready for a history lesson. I'm so stoked about this. Chapter 19. In response to the Great War, dragons claimed the western lands and griffins the central ones, abandoning the barons and the memory of General Daramore, who nearly destroyed the continent with his army. Our allies sailed home, and we began a period of peace and prosperity as the provinces of Navarre united for the first time behind the safety of our wards under the protection of the first bonded riders. Navarre, an unedited history by Colonel Lewis Markham. Wait a second, that's Professor Markham.
Yeah, that's why I made that face.
Wait, I did not put that in my notes. I fell so deeply down this way in the rabbit hole that I wasn't even looking at who... Okay.
I didn't realize until you said Markham out loud.
I'm going to walk you guys through my understanding of this. It's a lot. And then we're going to talk about what is a big deal about Markham writing this. Okay. So this is the first and only mention of the Great War in Fourth Wing at all. I did a word search, which is how I pieced together some of the puzzle pieces, which is the war right before and led to the unification of Navarre, which is what they call the founding of their country, over 600 years ago from the point we are in the book. Here is what we know. We find out in Iron Flame that over 600 years ago, this General Daramore ruined the lands of the barons during the Great War. Because he ruined it, the dragons abandoned the land. So they were there. The dragons were in the barons and relocated to the western lands, choosing the location of the Vale behind Basgaeth. The dragons then agreed to bond with 6 humans, or maybe 7. We haven't gotten clarification about that now that we know there's a 7th breed, also known as the First 6, who fought in the Great War to raise the wards over Navarre with the dragons. When they did this, they left the rest of the world out, including the central lands that the Griffins claimed, only giving 1 year for people to move there. Also, the Barrens are where the Venin re-emerged at some point after unification, as it says in Iron Flame that something killed them off during the Great War. And we will talk about this more in episode 9. Interestingly, we also find out in Iron Flame that the unabridged history of the First 6 tome paints this General Daramore as the enemy and the allies as the Isle Kingdoms, which are not even mentioned in Fourth Wing at all. So we will go into this more in a history lesson bonus episode or wait for our Iron Flame deep dive. But that is the context that this epigraph is talking about, pieced together with more information from the rest of the series so far. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When I first did my rereads, and even this one, I did not understand the history. It goes right over my head every time she mentions it, and this made it make sense. Clearly, we're still getting more as we go.
Mm-hmm.
But this is huge, and we're going to talk more about like what it means in the next episode. But the fact that this is an unedited history by Colonel Lewis Markham, so that's in the past, he knows this. Oh my gosh. I need to time to think a little bit more on that. Is more so going to affect what we talk about in the next episode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on from that history lesson, I hope it made sense. If you have any questions, again, we have a Discord. Like, let's go over there and tease this out a little bit. I think that I'm going to go on a deeper dive, trying to collect all of the history and just try and see if there's some sort of line we can draw through it, because at this point, I'm fascinated by this. Now, time to join our riot as we take flight into our foreshadowing, overarching questions, and theories section. Now, some of these I will list for the sake of time. Starting with, when talking about each other's relics, Riddick tells Violet that her relic being on her back will keep her safer if she's ever separated from Taryn, much like Violet says about their rider uniforms lacking patches and names in case they are separated from their dragons across enemy lines. I think this is for sure foreshadowing this happening, but with Vi's silver hair, it's not like the real enemy that we know of, the Venom, isn't going to know who she is. So I think this might happen to one of our other core characters. Just throwing that out there. Next, Violet notices that Quinn's signet patch is dark green with 2 silhouettes on it, but does not know what signet that means. Well, we know now that she can astral project. And I looked right over this in my first read, and why didn't I connect the 2 silhouettes thing? But I didn't really realize that that could be a signet, so. When Violet runs into Professor Markham in the archives, he says, "She was my prized student until the Riders Quadrant stole her away. I had hopes she would return. But alas, she has bonded to not 1, but 2 dragons." He is referring to Dane's plan to help her escape to the Scribe Quadrant. Totally right over my head, my first reads. Also, the fact that the archives have a fire mitigation system is totally foreshadowing. Quote, "Less air, less risk of our history burning into the ground." Those fire mitigation systems, again, the shotgun needs to go off. They're going off at some point, guys. We also get a clue that it's not just history that the scribes censor and manipulate, but also information from the front lines, which we see play out in Battle Brief. Jasenia says, "The responsibility we have not only to record history, but to speed information from the front lines is more than I could have ever imagined." So this was foreshadowing what we will come to learn is Markham censoring information from Battle Brief in the next episode. When trying to hide her thoughts from Jeremiah with bookish shit, Vi recites, quote, "Many Navarian defense posts exist beyond the safety of our wards. Such posts are considered to be in a zone of imminent danger and should only be staffed by military personnel and never the civilians who usually accompany them." This was absolutely setting up for Athbin and how it's considered imminent danger outside of the wards because that's where Venom can channel. And then they're sent there. Yeah.
For those of you who are not watching on YouTube, my face just went shook.
Blank. Yeah. Honestly, I know I'm throwing a lot, but like there's so many Easter eggs. Violet points out the similarities between Xaden and Bodhi, saying Bodhi is just a softer, more approachable version of Xaden. And I think that it is mentioned too frequently to not come into play at some point. Like, maybe Bodhi is used as Xaden on some mission. Or the option I like less is maybe Bodhi is killed by someone who thinks that he is Xaden.
No. I can definitely see that happening, but I really, really don't want it to.
I mean, me neither, but something's gonna happen. Violet notes that Garrick and Bodhi come into her room after the attack fully dressed in the middle of the night, and I didn't put this together on my own. I actually connected it when reading the fan fiction I talk about all the time by Belle_BB of Xaden's point of view, but they were about to go on a mission to smuggle daggers when this happened. Xaden tells her it was third-year business, but if they were sent on a mission to an outpost, he would not have been able to stop what he was doing and not go on the mission, and he wouldn't have been at Basgaiath the next day to accuse Amber. So it must have been a smuggle run, which also answers our question about when they fit going on these missions to do these smuggle runs in. I guess they just don't sleep. And then I thought about how long the flights are supposed to be and how it doesn't seem realistic for them to get there and back in one night. And then I had an epiphany last night, and I text Karen at like 3 a.m. What if Garrick's signet is distance wielding, and that's how they get to and from missions within a single night? Now, this came to me as I was thinking about this part in this set of chapters and several Rebecca Yarros interviews that she's done recently. When she was asked what signet she would have, she said something along the lines of, "It's one you haven't seen yet, called distance wielding." All right. And in another, she was asked which character she would want to be stranded on an island with, and she said Garrick, and you don't even know why. And she also said that we will find out what his signet is in Onyx Storm and that she loves it.
This is part of the reason we started this podcast, because I get several middle of the night theory texts from Hannah, and I love it. I think it would make so much sense for this to be his signet, and I'm wondering why we haven't seen it yet. Like, why is it a secret from us right now? And if this is his signet, do you think that this is how they got Violet to Brennan in time during the War Games?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good point. So I know that Athman is right next to Orisha, but you're right. We should keep an eye out as we get through the rest of the book for any other instances where he could be using it. If this is it, that would like clue us in and confirm. But also specifically, I don't know if it's mentioned how long it took them, because she blacks out. So she doesn't really know how long it took them to get to Orisha. And I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes we get told like flight times to and from places. So like maybe we should start paying attention to that and see if there's any that like don't add up. But also I wouldn't blame Rebecca if some of it didn't add up, because that would be a lot to keep track of.
100%. And my thinking for that, even if it was close by, any extra time could have saved Violet's life.
That's very true. That's very true.
Also, just watch his signet be something like the ability to make food appear out of nowhere or something like that. And that's why Rebecca Yarros would want to be stranded with him on an island.
Honestly, it has to be something that either can help you survive, because like Dane's memory reading ability is not going to do shit on a stranded island. But you know what? I know there's a theory that Violet is a distance wielder. But if that was the case, then she would have just said Violet.
True.
And I think most importantly, the fact that she said that her signet would be distance wielding, and then goes on to say that we find out about Garrick's and she loves it, tells me that that's his signet. Like, I think I'm like 99% certain on this.
Or she's like me and just has a crush on Garrick and wants to be stranded with him on an island.
You know, it could be I would want to be stranded with Xaden and his signets. Well, I mean, yeah, shadows aren't doing anything, and neither is his mind reading, so. But if I gotta be stranded, I mean, may as well have fun. And finally, when Xaden says, "Promise me you won't tell anyone about the time stopping. It's not just for your safety. Rare abilities, when kept secret, are the most valuable form of currency we possess." This should have smacked us right in the face. We should have known in that moment.
We should have at least guessed that he had some kind of rare ability.
Or at least that he knew of one that someone has. But then he says, when kept secret. So it's like, I know we both read straight into Iron Flame, but it's these kind of things that we should be paying attention to throughout the rest of this book and the next one for what could come in Onyx Storm. And that leads us perfectly into our questions and analysis portion. So let's talk about Xaden's signet. We do have an addendum that we've mentioned briefly already to last week's discussion. I was second guessing myself about why I was so confident that the scalp prickles are in fact Xaden using his intrinsic signet, and I found out where it was confirmed. So both in an interview with Variety, which we'll link in the show notes for you to read, and also in the London Q&A we mentioned before, Rebecca confirmed it, but also told us he can in fact hear her thoughts. She touched on this in the Variety interview as well, saying, quote, "So how does he know exactly what he is? How does he know if that's full intrinsic signet and not just a partial one? How does he know what it is? He has no clue. They have no intrinsics alive, so he has no idea what he is. Is it intentions? Is it words? Is it thoughts? He has no clue. All he knows is he has to hide it, or they're going to kill him."
Oof.
At this point, we can confidently say Xaden is a full intrinsic. He just doesn't know it yet. And, I mean, if you think about how signets evolve over time, maybe it started out as intentions, and he just wasn't certain as it moves, because he says that he sees the intentions as pictures, like mental pictures, which we should keep in mind for the mental pictures he must be getting when Violet is sending him her thoughts. Just saying. So we counted 3 moments in this set of chapters where Violet's head tickles, scalp prickles, something. Importantly, this is the first chapter sections where we get these scalp prickles after Xaden and Violet are bonded. Xaden says in Iron Flame, "Our bond makes it way too easy for you to send your intentions without even realizing it." So this tells us that some of these instances could be Violet sending them to him rather than him outwardly and intentionally looking for it. The first time it happens on page 199, we talked about this earlier, where her whole head tingles. It could actually be the first time this happens where Violet is sending it to him, because Violet was already looking at him, focused on him and how beautiful he is, when he locks eyes with her and her head tingles. So that isn't him seeking her out first. And she's thinking very interesting things here. Again, back to those mental pictures. The next time, page 213, "I feel a tingle in my scalp and know if I turn, I'll find Xaden watching us." To your point here, Karen, last time we talked about how it always seems like it's before she notices him, and Violet seems to have picked up on this too.
Actually, going back to what you said, I love what you said about Violet. It's Violet sending her intentions, and that she's actually able to do that, because I had never thought of that. And I think that's actually could be what was happening there. And I also love how whenever she feels him but hasn't turned around to look at him or anything, she just gives him the finger because she knows he's looking at her.
It was actually such a cute little moment. And then on page 225, we get our first moment where he uses it on more than intentions. When talking to Vi after her attack, she thinks, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. I repeat in my head as Xaden wipes the blood from my dagger. And Xaden responds, yes, you're alive. So after Rebecca Yarros confirmed this for us, we can say this is the first time we know he read her thoughts and responded to them. I am confused, though, on how he didn't realize that he did this, that he responded to her thoughts directly, not intentions here. She's not like intending to stay alive and he says, yes, you're alive. That doesn't make any sense. Because I had chalked it up to him just thinking she said it out loud and like not noticing. But Violet specifically says out loud, I didn't realize I said that out loud.
Girly, you didn't. I really don't have any idea how he didn't catch himself accidentally responding to her thoughts. But then I thought maybe he did and just kind of downplayed her reaction to it, just saying it's the shock. Maybe kind of gaslighting her into thinking that, oh, you did say it out loud. You just didn't think you did because you were shocked.
Yeah, well, maybe he did notice it, but that wouldn't explain why he still thinks a book later that he can only read intentions.
True.
Like, that should have told him. And you'd think, moving forward, he'd be more careful and not do that again, but we know he does. So I'm almost like, it makes more sense if he didn't realize it, even though that doesn't make sense. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he thinks that she actually did say it out loud. Maybe he's being truthful there and he thinks that she said it out loud but didn't know she did because of the shock.
Yeah, that's true. That gives him a pass on this one. Not so much the next time that happens if she says it out loud, but I think she thinks it maybe next time. So we'll have to look out for that. We also like to consider when we think he uses his intrinsic signet on others. All right. So Taryn says at one point, do not dare to try and read me, human, or you'll regret it. And while we find out that Taryn doesn't know about Xaden's second signet in Iron Flame, I'm wondering if this could have been an Easter egg that Rebecca either forgot she included or she changed her mind about Taryn knowing and decided it was an iffy Easter egg that could be taken in other ways.
I noted this too, and I could not remember if Xaden's intrinsic abilities were a secret from Taryn, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I thought that they were, but could not remember for the life of me. I do think it could have been an Easter egg, but it's also an interesting thought process about her changing her mind about Taryn knowing.
Well, and Taryn was really offended because Sigale kept it from him. So she chose her bond with Xaden over her bond with Taryn. And I imagine he will still be pretty upset about this in Onyx Storm. This all does make me wonder, though, if Xaden can read dragons' intentions, or technically at this point, thoughts.
I don't know. Oh,
that could be a pretty major thing because we know how protected even speaking to dragons is. But imagine if he can read their thoughts. And this line,
dangerous.
If it was initially an Easter egg, points that he can.
Ooh.
We'll have to think on that one. We'll let that one brew a little bit.
So there was only one moment where we found that Dane touches Violet on her face on page 203, but we talked about that earlier.
Yep. So on to our theories section using our signets of foresight. We're going to talk about a couple of our predictions building off of the prophecy theory that we talked about last episode. I found several moments that I think support the prophecy theory. I think at this point I'm convinced. All right. First, Violet has the memory dream about her dad where he says her path is scribe, not writer. This was when she was young, before Mira became a writer, because Violet says, but what if I want to be a writer like Brennan and Mom? What if Violet's dad somehow found out about the prophecy sometime after this memory took place, and that is why he started researching feathertails.
Whoa! That is a super interesting theory. Violet's dad had to have been so much more involved than we realized, good or bad.
Well, and that might be why Rebecca's been so stingy about giving us any of his research. Because we're 2 books in, it's been mentioned how many times, and Violet still hasn't went to go find it. It's got to be like groundbreaking information.
Ooh.
Also, when Andarna screamed mine and gave Violet her power, the word choice here of mine stood out to me on my first read as odd. Like no, or something else that makes more sense to me than mine. Though I sort of understand the sentiment, I think this fits with the idea that Violet was prophesized to be hers.
She said, I knew you would be mine.
That keeps coming up. It's so... I don't, am I convincing myself, guys? Like, am I just down this rabbit hole? Or is this actually fitting together? Like, I feel like these are puzzle pieces that fit.
Yeah.
Anyways. Most of all, though, when Violet is visiting the archives and Darna checks in on her because Vi is sad and says, quote, "It's hard to love a second home as much as the first." And Violet says, "It's easy when the second home is the right one." Again, a huge moment of acknowledgement for Vi here, but knowing what we do about Andarna, not just that her parents died before she hatched, but that this happened 650 years ago, and she was conscious in her egg, so she knew her parents. And that was her first home. This fits with the prophecy theory, because why would Andarna not hatch with her parents in the home she loved so much? Taryn is middle-aged at 100. They could have lived like 200 years while she was still an egg. And she chose every moment to stay in her egg instead of be with them. We see how bonded Taryn and Sigale are. That's not even a sacrifice I feel like her parents would have made. The only rational thing I can think of here is that she was prophesized to bond with a human that had a mind of a scribe and the heart of a writer. That would be the end of the Venin. Karen, are you convinced yet?
Yeah, I'm 100%, 99%, almost 100% convinced. And I made a note of this Andarna quote because it stuck out to me so much. And the way that Andarna says it didn't just sound like she was sympathizing with Violet. It's like she's speaking from experience.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I definitely think that there was a prophecy and Violet is the one fulfilling it.
I'll say 99%, but I think at this point, like nothing else makes sense for me.
Right.
Not like this does. So that is all for that theory. Jumping over to a new one that I came across this week. We talked about the line in chapter 15, page 172, last episode, where Taryn says, "I know exactly who and what you are, Violet Sorengale," and how the what has prompted lots of speculation. I came across a theory by disaster_prone on TikTok that has blown my mind. So we know Violet's mom was sick when she was pregnant with her. And many of us think there is some connection here to her silver hair. This user asks, what if Papa Sorengale had Lilith consume dragon egg shells to help cure her? Okay, they back it up with several points. Xaden tells us that dragon magic lingers in dragon shells long after the dragons hatch. Taryn calls Violet Silver One. He says, "I know exactly who and what you are." Violet communicates with multiple dragons throughout both books, something that humans are not supposed to do with dragons they aren't bonded to. but she does freely with no consequences and is even respected by the dragons that she does it with. She is told by Felix and Ironflame that her signet is pure power. She just manifests it as lightning for now, and dragons channel pure power. They list other things, but I think these points were the most solid out of them.
It's giving Tangled vibes, where the mom is sick during her pregnancy and eats the magical flower to cure herself, and in turn the baby gets some sort of magical ability.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is. Tangled is my favorite Disney movie, so I love that analogy. But what do you think? Do you think that this is viable? I guess I should ask.
I do, and also Violet literally jumps onto Riddick's dragon at one point too, and if that happened with anyone else, they would have tossed that rider right off of them.
I didn't think about that. I think when I read it, I just chalked it up to like they're on the same team, same side, and she was jumping on to save Riddick. Does she speak to the dragon at that? I think she might even do that multiple times,
right,
in different battles. So that just adds to it. Good job, Karen. I think you might have just convinced me further. I'm not 100% convinced, but I do think that this could either go along with a prophecy or be an alternative. One of the commenters on this post at LCUAS10 said that this could explain why the elders were talking about Violet when Andarna overheard them and decided to hatch for her. If this theory is true, I don't think that this would make her part dragon, but connect her to the dragons in a magical way that like allows her to do things with dragons that otherwise wouldn't. I do like this theory better than her being part Venom. But Rebecca said at the London Q&A on the topic of Violet's hair being silver that, quote, "You will understand the reasons for it. She will grapple with the reasons for it." This makes me think that her hair has something to do with Venom, as it implies she doesn't like whatever her hair symbolizes. She grapples with the reasons for it. So I'm less inclined to believe the dragon egg theory, but I do love it. It's really unique. And I hope that that's it and not that she's part Venom.
Yeah, I'm gonna ignore the possibility of her being part Venom. But I do agree with the dragon shell theory. I don't think it makes her part dragon. But I do like this theory because it just makes the bond between Andarna and Violet that much more special.
It does.
I have always kind of seen them as cut from the same cloth. So there has to be something that connects them deeper than the dragon rider bond.
Oh, that's true. Well, I mean, I would assume he had to have gotten it from a Feathertail. So, on that, all right, jumping down this rabbit hole. This would have been before Violet was born, so 20 years ago. It would have been from a specific dragon.
Yeah.
That's not Terran. That's not Andarna.
Not Sigale.
So if this was the case, I wonder if that connects her to a third dragon in a unique way. But if it does, you'd think that dragon would have bonded her.
Maybe. It's one of the greens. Maybe it's Mira's dragon.
Well, in that's the thing. We don't really know the ages of many of them. But
no.
I just think that's something, if we're really going to put stock in this theory, that could be an implication to look out for.
And that wraps up chapters 17 through 19. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to join us in our next episode where we will deep dive into chapters 20 through 21 out this Thursday.
As always, we encourage you to email us all of your thoughts, theories, and suggestions, or drop them below if you're watching on YouTube, or join us over on Discord.
If you haven't listened to our new bonus episodes, go do that in the meantime.
Until next time, dearest fantasy readers, prepare yourselves to roast a wing leader as we continue our journey through the Empyrean series.